Integrative Inquiry, Week 12 Practice, Integration of Strengths and Opportunities to Improve.
So with this invitation, I'd like to invite us to begin to notice the body in the chair. And bring a gentle attention to the sensation of the feet on the floor. You're noticing the whole body in the chair, the seat, the back. Noticing where the hands are placed. And inviting the eyes to soften. Or it's as if you're looking at this tree but not really seeing it. So just a gentle gaze. And then invite a gentle attention to rest ever so kindly on the breath sensation in the body. You may bring a hand to your belly or your chest. And let's see if we can get really curious about the breath sensation in the body. See if you can notice the quality of air that's passing through the nostrils. Maybe it's warm, moist, dry, cool. Seeing if you can notice whether the breath is deep and long, shallow, short. And see if you can notice what you're noticing without judgment. Just a gentle one-word name to what's being noticed. And you're likely noticing the natural inclination of the mind to wander to past, future, to other sound sensations, bodily sensations. Whenever you notice this, see if you can name what you're noticing just ever so gently and kindly with one word. Avoiding going into the story of whether what you are noticing should be there or exploring why it's there. Simply noting and inviting the attention to rest back on the breath sensation in the belly. Getting curious about the breath. Seeing if you can notice the subtleties of the shifts in the inhale and the exhale. Can you notice what you're noticing without getting lost in the interpretation of it? Can you notice the beginning of the inhale and its ending? The beginning of the exhale and its ending. Can you notice the ever so subtle pause between the transition of the inhale to the exhale, and of the exhale to the inhale? Just a gentle practice in noticing what we're noticing. And then kindly directing attention to rest back on the breath sensation in the body. And then whenever you're ready, gently releasing the attention on the breath sensation, directing it back to the body in the chair. Opening the eyes if they're closed, or sharpening your gaze into focus. And allowing some wishes to arise. You are here. You intended to be here. And I am grateful. Thank you. So taking a moment to pause and inviting you to open your chat window if you haven't already opened it. And inviting you to utilize the chat window at any time you'd like to share what you're noticing, share comments, insights, thoughts, questions. This practice of becoming mindfully compassionate leaders is a practice of noticing our strengths as well as our opportunities for growth with a real gentleness, with kindness, with this quality of suspending the yum and yuck of what we notice. Of course, we'll notice the yum and yuck. We can note that and then gently shift our attention back to what or where we'd like to place our attention. Leveraging the wisdom of the body, bringing attention to the breath sensation to soothe the reactivity of the mind wandering, the reactivity of the yuck, or sometimes the yum, and grounding back into a place of exploration, of inquiry, what's here, what's really here, this looking again practice. So as we turn up the volume on the inner inquiry, and we mentioned in the webinar that there are several tools that you can utilize to explore your strengths or your personality go-tos under times of stress. And you can utilize those as opportunities to notice when those strengths are at play, and then also to notice the opposite of those strengths. And the invitation here in this webinar is, in a bit, we'll be looking at those, the strengths and the opposite characteristics of those strengths, as really an opportunity to integrate. So rather than, how many of you have had mentors that tell you to show up differently than where you're showing up? I gotta move this window so I can see your hands come up. So anybody? Yeah, all right, yep, thanks. Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Not alone, appreciate that, yeah. So it's a tendency that leaders have, typically our supervisors, of getting into there's one way of leading, or there's one way of being successful, and or perhaps they're seeing, observing us get in our own way. Get in our own way. Does that make sense? Get in our own way? Let me know if that makes sense. All right, what does it mean to get in our own way? It means that, for example, when my strength is showing up, I'm almost screaming and in the face of those with whom I'm working with, or the counter to it, my opportunity for growth is showing up and it's screaming. And so what someone is doing is trying to be in service to my self-awareness by coming in and saying, you may want to tone that down in these particular contexts or in this particular culture. Or you might want to tune this back up, you know, step this up in this particular context, in this culture. And so it could be either that those mentors have a particular idea of what it means to look like, leading looks like, or it could be that they're noticing where we are not practicing self-awareness and are inviting us into a noting of what we're noticing by saying, but by giving a particular directive. So rather than an evocative method, which would invite us to notice and inquire into, it's basically, hey, you better tune that down. And what we're inviting in this course, again, is that this inner inquiry. So you'd be utilizing these tools to explore your strengths and their opposites so that we can get into some exercises. Yeah. And again, feel free to utilize the chat window at any time you might have questions or want to dive in a little deeper from your own experience. So just to get us going on this, if you haven't had an opportunity to use Strength Finders or the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or your colors, or whatever the rest of those inventories are, we'll just go ahead right now and get involved in a little bit of reflective practice. So in a moment, I will be pulling up Brene Brown's, from her book, Dare to Lead, Braving Inventory. This is the Braving Inventory. And this is, again, just one way of reflecting on your strengths. And so my invitation to you would be to examine this. Let's just take the part that's in here. This is, again, Brene Brown's The Braving Inventory. You can get it online for free. Just Google Brene Brown, Braving Inventory, and you can download this whole thing because there are several aspects. It's from her book, Dare to Lead, which I highly recommend. We require it for reading in the doctoral course. But not all of you are in that course. So that is an invitation. So what I'd like to do here is pause my video and invite you to just take a moment and journal. You can journal in the chat window if you'd like to, or you can journal in your own notebook, so it's for your eyes only. And as you read each one of these, just consider where your strengths may be. Is this a strength of yours? Are you demonstrating behaviors or beliefs that are in the opposite? So there's no right or wrong, just an exploration of internal inquiry. So take a moment and write, again, whatever you're noticing what you're noticing as you read this, and reflect. I'm just taking a moment to wrap up wherever you might be. Just getting an idea of, for example, when do you respect others' boundaries? And when do you not? And we were using an example earlier in another class of how supervisors sometimes just walk into their subordinates' offices and plop down and share a concern, or they might barge in when somebody's meeting and say, I need this by X certain time. So that would be an example of not respecting boundaries. Right? Or somebody's door is closed and they're working and you knock on the door anyway. Just noticing. Okay. All right, so we'll come back to this, but this is just an invitation. We'll play around with this integration. Another way to get to this insight, oh, and by the way, Brene Brown also does have the Braving Inventory or Leadership, a Dare to Lead inventory actually on her website. So we have her website available in the resources section of the Rushing to Yoga website. So if you click on resources, you can click on practices, and if you scroll down, you'll see Brene Brown's website, and you can click on that. There's brave classrooms, those sorts of things as well. So you could take that inventory and get those results and also use that. So the point here is we're looking at strengths, and then we're looking at the characteristics of those strengths that would be the opposite. So just taking this, you're willing to say no. The opposite of that is you're willing to say yes. All right, so does everybody have something at least to look at? All right. Okay, so I'm going to go back then to this exercise, and I'll ask just to check in moment, what did you notice from responding to the Braving Inventory? Was there anything in particular that you noticed? Any insights you gained, or a confirmation of things you already knew in reflecting on that inventory? Just taking a moment. Okay. And again, we only saw a piece of that inventory. All right. So when I utilize this, some people start to reflect. For example, that just happened earlier this morning. Some people realize, wow, I noticed that because my supervisor just comes into my office and makes requests, that I started doing that to the people I supervise, just unknowingly, right? It became like, it was role modeled this way. So I started enacting it, and I realized that's not really who I am and who I want to become. And it's not in line with this person saying, it's not in line with my perspective of a mindful, compassionate leader. And so in the noticing, what the empowerment that person received was like, wow, I can pause now and ask, is this a good time to interrupt you? I have an urgent need. If it's not a good time, please come visit me when I can, when you can. As classroom teachers, lots of times when I think of boundaries is setting times when it is okay for students to ask us questions. So maybe 1 a.m. in the morning is not the best time to receive a phone call because that's when they're working, right? So Mike said sometimes more demands than requests or invitations. So you noticed, yeah, there are more demands than requests or invitations. Yes, yeah, really insightful. Yes. And so what we can begin to do is notice whether we're on the receiving end of that or we're on the giving end of that. And what we'll do in a moment is we'll start to look at opposites and we'll play with that. Okay, so for right now, if you could just hold that journal, those observations that you made, and let's build on that a little bit. So the invitation here is just to take 1 minute, at the time, 1 minute, and journal. You can do this privately on your own journaling tool, with your own pen and paper, or you can use the chat window. And I'll set the timer for 1 minute, and then I'll interrupt you when that timer is done, and just invite you to journal what keeps you from becoming the leader you know you can be, or being the leader you know you can be? What keeps you from living into the leader that you know you are? What keeps you? And just journal whatever comes to mind, no right or wrong. What keeps you from being the leader you know you can be? Just continuing to journal whatever's coming to mind. I'm taking a few moments to complete your writing. And then taking a moment to ground back into the chair. Bring a gentle attention to the breath in the body. And then taking a moment just to reread what you've written. What keeps you from being the leader you know you can be? And perhaps noting where was that in alignment with your journaling on the braving inventory. Noticing your strengths and the opposite characteristics of those strengths. And you're welcome again to use the chat window to share whatever you're noticing. And I invite you to do so if you feel comfortable doing so. And as you consider whether or not you'd like to share what you noticed in that exercise, share a thought that was shared again earlier in class, in a face-to-face class today in the same class. But one of the participants had a big insight that for her it was giving herself permission to show up as she feels is in alignment with who she is. Just giving herself permission to do that again and again in this moment and in this moment and in this moment. So noticing, here I wasn't showing up as the leader I know I can be. The next moment is a new moment and a new opportunity for a new choice. So I'll choose now to show up as a leader that I'd like to be. And Mike, you're sharing that your wife says she needs to first practice trusting and being an authentic leader with her own self, be the love and peace she wants to see in the world. Yeah, and what I hear in there is a lot of wisdom, of noticing, I want to practice in here first, and then I'm going to try it on here. And again, remembering that this is a practice, it's a constant practice. I'll practice here, and then I'm going to try it on, and then notice what I'm noticing. Right? Maybe tweak it, maybe not. But remembering that everything is contextual and cultural. So what I may be noticing, I can consistently show up as a leader I want to be in this context, in this culture. And when I move into here, I'm noticing I have some different challenges. So I'm practicing maybe some different tools. And Aja noticed fear. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It is, a fear shows up a lot. Yeah, I certainly experienced that. Like, noticing I don't want to be who I believe I am or can become in this for fear of rejection or for fear of failure, whatever, right? And Stephen just mentioned that, fear of failure keeps me from being the leader I know I can be. And so, Aja, you're saying fear, but I would imagine at the beginning of this course, it would have been a 10 on the scale of 1 being low and 10 being high, but fear is about a 4.5. Thank you, Aja. I hear a lot of wisdom. Thank you. And Stephen, you're saying it's a fear of failure that keeps you from being the leader you know you can be, or perhaps you don't think that I should be a leader. I hear a lot of wisdom. I don't really want to be a leader, but I hear that too. I feel that. Stephen, I was just experiencing it this morning. I'm like, I don't want to lead in that environment. Yeah, I don't want to lead in that environment. But I often find that I'm looked toward to take action on things, that I can't sit back and just watch things happen, especially when you disagree with them. Yeah. Yeah, I hear a lot of wisdom. And Ari, fear and doubt. Yes. So we're in this shared humanity, yeah, that we're experiencing this. And so where I notice I might feel empowered here, I might notice fear here or doubt here. And so the noticing what we're noticing and meeting it with self-compassion. So we're noticing what we're noticing. And when we notice fear and doubt and a resistance, we're just meeting what we're meeting that with self-compassion. And then see what happens next. See what happens next. I also like to use when fear arises, it triggers my amygdala. So I practice the stop, breathe, notice. See what's moving in the reflection page. See what's moving into front stage. For me, sometimes it's like people are just going to hate this, or people are going to hate me, or I'm going to get in trouble for this. This is a tape that I play. I'm going to get in trouble for this. And then, and moving into the Byron Katie inquiry, I'm like, well, what would I do? Who would I be if I didn't think that was true? I would choose. Yeah, I would choose. So in this practice of mindful compassion, what sets this practice apart as leaders from many curricula on leadership is, but not all curriculum on leadership, is that this is an embodied practice. It's an embodied practice. And so what we're looking at is we're moving ourselves away from a habitual way of showing up to an inquiry, noticing what we're noticing one moment at a time. And then while embrace may feel like too strong, we could try on just acknowledging what is. So in a deeper embodiment, we're in complete inhibition, and we're really embracing what we're experiencing in the moment. And if there's trauma involved, then embracing is asking too much. So perhaps we're noticing and we're acknowledging, which is noticing, like, this is here. Remember, suffering is defined as resisting what is, by not accepting what is as what it is. So we're in moving to saying, this is what's here. That doesn't mean I have to accept what created it, right? That doesn't mean embracing what is here does not mean I'm embracing or accepting what created it. And then in this, we start to see movement, or what we talk about in this course as awareness of next moment choice, an awareness of next moment choice. So it's awareness of what's here, a clarity, and then awareness of next moment choice, which could create movement, or in our 4-part definition of compassion, action to alleviate the pain and suffering. So what we are going to practice right now is this embodiment, an embodied way of being. And so how many of you are in locations where you are by yourself, or you can shut the door, or maybe move quickly to a place where you're by yourself? Okay, Aria, is anybody else? Some of you? Okay, Stephen, okay, great, good. All right, super. If you can physically move to a place where you're by yourself, even a closet, and close the door, what I'd love for you to do is begin some private role play. Now, what's really powerful is if you can find a trusted colleague or partner in your life. It could be a loved one, and try this on. But what I want to do is practice this with another with caution. So when I first was invited into this, it was through the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute for when we were becoming certified teachers. And I got to practice this with Mark Coleman, who I have like a depth of respect for. And we chose to practice spark and stillness. We chose to practice spark and stillness together because Mark saw me as somebody who's sparkly, alive, vibrant, sort of basically bouncing off the walls all of the time. Accurate description. And this is a characteristic that I love about myself, and it's a characteristic that mentors have invited me to tone down. Tone down. You're too much, Marilee. Tone it down. And Mark is a Buddhist. He's Buddhist. He is a revered teacher, and so stillness is like he's like still, like that's his way of being. And as a teacher, he wanted to add some more spark, and so we paired up, and we both put on spark, as much spark as we could. So for me, that was like, oh my gosh, I have to tell you about this. It's so exciting. It's like, oh, let me tell you. And I was jumping up and down, right? And then I practiced the opposite of that, which is complete stillness. So let me tell you about this. I'm really super excited. Okay, so you go to the extreme, right? And then the next practice is to focus on the end. What does it look like to bring spark and stillness into your embodied way of being? Like, it's not an acting, right? Just embodying spark, embodying stillness. Let me tell you about this. I'm so excited. I can't wait to tell you. What does that look like? So you try it on. And if you're doing it with a trusted partner, the partner can give you feedback. And so I might say, I really feel like I'm still holding back my spark in that. And you know, my partner would say, nope, there was plenty of spark. Like, right, like, or whatever. Or no, you're right. Yeah, I could see you were holding back. Right. So you're getting the feedback. So my invitation to you is you can pick one of these: arrogance and humility, attainment and non-attainment, depth and lightness, rigor and spontaneity, spark and stillness. Or you could go back to what keeps you from being. So fear. What's the opposite of fear? Grounded confidence, maybe. What's the opposite of doubt? Assuredness. Yeah. So you may be playing with that, or something that maybe came up for you as you looked at the Brene Brown's inventory. Holding boundaries, having no boundaries at all. Yeah. So my invitation for you is to first pick a quality and its complete opposite. So let's just take a moment, and I invite you to pick that for you, for yourself. So maybe it's one of these that came out: fear, doubt, and its opposite. Okay, does everybody have one? Yeah, can I see? Does everybody have one? Let me do this. Does anybody not have one yet? Okay, yeah. All right, good. We all have it. Great, thank you. All right, and now what I'd like to do is just give you a minute to, in your own private space, act out one, embody one. So what does what does fear look like, and how do you embody it? And then I'd like for you to embody it in the next minute. So I have a minute. I have my timer ready. Okay, ready? Do you have your one word? Go ahead and act it out until you hear the sound of the bell. So really embody that. Be as loud as you can, or as most of whatever it is as you can. So taking a moment, just feel it. Note the physiology. Go to the extreme. Go to the extreme of it. What does it look like in conversation? Be in conversation with it. What are you noting in physiology? What are you noticing in thoughts? Okay, and now begin to release that. And invite a gentle attention to the bell, releasing that extreme. And an invitation to ground back into the body in this moment of time. Really feel your feet on the floor if you're standing, your seat in the chair if you're sitting. Bring a hand to the belly. Sense the breath in the body. Okay. Now let's take the opposite of that. Whatever it was that you were experiencing, let's invite in the opposite and embody that for a minute. So now you're taking the opposite of that and you're moving in that. You're feeling the physiology of that. So if you were working with fear, you're working with total confidence, total non-fear, total boldness, total courage. What does it feel like in the body? What thoughts are you noticing? What does it look like in conversation? Really being in conversation with the opposite. Noticing the physiology, being in conversation, noticing the physiology. Okay, and now beginning to let that go, letting that go, the opposite. And bringing attention now back to the sound of the bell. And grounding attention in the body sensation, the feet on the floor, seat in the chair. Bringing attention to the breath sensation in the body. Perhaps bringing a hand to the belly. And now let's invite in the and, going to the and. What does it look like, feel like, to bring those two opposites together into the embodiment of them? The integration into the embodiment. So if you're working with fear, it's fear and courage or boldness. What does that look like to bring them both in? Spark and stillness, what does it look like to bring them both in? Okay, so please begin that practice for 1 minute. So you're working with the integration. The focus is on the and. Both are in there. Both are in the body. What are you noticing physiologically? What are you noticing with the thoughts? Have a conversation with it. What are the words of this integration? What are the words now? What are you noticing physiologically as you use the language of this integration? The both, the and, they're both there. What are you noticing? Now inviting in a release of the integration. Inviting attention to rest on the sound of the bell. Inviting attention to rest on the body sensation, feet on the floor. Pressing them in, right, left, right, left. Bringing a hand to the belly. Noticing the sensation of the breath in the body. Thank you for practicing that. So what did you notice as you practiced the extreme? So we have practiced one extreme, and the other extreme, and then the coming together, the integration. What did you notice? Feel free to use the chat window. So did any of you notice still some like, maybe some struggle, like one seemed to be winning out, or you're still feeling like a little forced? Yeah, thank you, yes. So this is the practice, yes, just like all of this, where we're practicing, what does it really look like to embody both of them? And what we're moving back to in this practice of this integration is the embracing of what is. So we're moving from just acknowledging, I see anxiety, I see fear, I see doubt, to then remembering, and there's an opposite of this here. There's an opposite of this here. There is courage, there is boldness, there is confidence. What does it look like to welcome them both, to embrace them both? And what movement happens out of that? Does that sound fun? So Becca, you noticed the calm and slowed down breathing, the still versus my normal of spark. The integration was nice. Thank you, Becca. Thank you. Yes, great. And so we're bringing this into practice. So whenever I notice like, whoa, spark's getting out of, spark is starting to turn off the room, let's integrate with stillness. Or stillness is so present I can't get anybody's attention. I think I'll add some spark. Yeah. And then we can play around with this so that it feels authentic rather than a performance. That it feels authentic rather than a performance. So sometimes, none of you have asked this question, but sometimes when I'm introducing mindful compassion practices, people begin to perform mindfulness. Perform mindfulness. Does anybody know what I mean? Have you seen it? Yeah. So it's like that's performance. That's actually not the practice. That's actually performing. And so the invitation here is to remain authentic. I can't perform humility. I can perform humility, and everyone in the room will notice I'm performing humility. Some leaders that I work with who perform empathy. It's like, oh man, you're just using the words. Like, you know that, right? So noticing. And Aja, you felt stress in your neck performing the fear. Yeah. So even in the performance of it, it can have a physiological impact. Yeah. And perhaps it was a connection with the fear, so much so that the fear returned. Yeah, sometimes that happens. So with playing with this, you can see the benefit of playing with these with a trusted partner. They can hold the space for you to practice, and they can also then provide feedback. Yeah, they can ask you, what did you notice? So you might notice, I still notice with the integration there may have been stress in the neck. And they're like, I noticed that too. And they may invite in, how about inviting in more of this? Like, try it again. So you can try it again. You can play with this until we begin to embrace. So the practice is that in any one moment I'm noticing fear, I can embrace it, bring it along the journey, along with courage and boldness, which I also have within here. Yeah. So we're moving away from a performance mentality of what our own beingness is, what it looks like and feels like, what our own being a mindful compassion leader is. It's not a performance, it's an embodiment. Does that sound fun? Okay, feel free to use the chat window if you have questions or comments. What I'd like to do here in noticing the time is on your course, LMS, there's another series of PowerPoints on interdependence. And the invitation is that you would open those and read those quotes. So we'd open, you open the PowerPoint, and the invitation would be to ground in the foundation of the body in the chair, and ground in the breath sensation in the body. And then invite a reading or listening to each quote. And just notice what interdependence is meaning for you. Interdependence is meaning. So when we begin to notice and practice integration, spark, still, feel, courage, we notice that there's an interdependence happening not only in our neurophysiology, but that is also happening out here, right? And Stephen, you spoke to this. When something is happening, you may not want to be the leader, but the interdependence of it calls for a leader, and you sense it's you. So you step forward, right? Or step into embracing and embodying. So integration as a leader and interdependence of a leader is integration is embracing and embodying all that is here, and integrating and trusting the emergence of all that is in here also that may not be visible at the moment. And the interdependence is trusting on beginning to work in our communities in a way where if I'm not remembering to practice, perhaps someone in my community is, and they're role modeling the way, they're embodying the practice. And then that gives me permission to move into the practice. Yeah. Okay. So this interdependence, the invitation is to examine those quotes. And what we'll do now is I'll invite you into a practice here. And the invitation, and feel free to use the boundaries. Feel free to use the there's a sign on my door that says a live webinar in place, which means probably something's wrong. So the invitation is to use the chat window if you have questions or comments. And then if not, my invitation to you is to notice the body in the chair. And Ari's asking a question as we notice the body in the chair. When people perform compassion, a somewhat common practice I've noticed, we refer to it as compassion bypass. Melville. Ooh, thank you. A compassion bypass. A sweat morsel for my conscience. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, a sweet morsel for my conscience. Yeah, a compassion bypass. Yes. Thank you for sharing that, Ari. I'm going to quote you on that one. That's a good one. Thank you. All right, so we're noticing the body in the chair, the breath sensation in the body. And I'm inviting you into the past, into a memory where you felt you needed help. Felt you needed help to resolve a problem, to fix something, to explore a possibility. You just felt you needed help. And how did you feel about needing help? What are you noticing physiologically right now as you remember this memory? Noticing needing help. You're noticing the only way through this is to ask for help. Thoughts are you noticing? What physiological sensations are you noticing? And let's say in this memory you actually asked for assistance. What did you notice in the asking for assistance? Did you notice in the body, physiologically? What did you notice in the thoughts? Noticing the sound. Noticing the body and the thoughts as you asked for help. And then what did you notice as in noticing the response to your request for help? What did you notice in the body? What did you notice in your thoughts? In the response you were given when you asked for help. So releasing that image, shaking it out if you need to do so. Inviting your attention back to the body, in the chair, the breath sensation in the body. The invitation is to journal on what you noticed. And thank you, Becca, for using the chat window. So what did you notice? And I'll read what you shared, Becca, in a moment. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that. So you're welcome to use the chat window. You're welcome to use your own private journaling. Just a minute to note how you felt about needing to ask for help. What were your thoughts around it? What specifically you sensed? What were your thoughts around that? Let's give you a moment. Yes, thank you to use the chat window. We'll go there in a moment. So Becca, thank you for sharing. You noticed that your heart rate went up. Your voice not as well modulated, sharper tone on the phone when helper did not respond appropriately, and you were frustrated by that, and your body really tensed up. Yes, thank you. I hear a lot of awareness. Thank you, Becca. And so this is an illustration. Sometimes we can reach out for help and people don't respond in the way that we would hope. And so we notice a lot of physiology around that. We notice a lot of thoughts around that. Right? Thank you. Ari, how about you? You notice that asking for assistance is difficult. I suspect my strong introversion has something to do with it. I'm often surprised that others respond warmly for my request for help. Thank you for sharing, Ari. Yes, so we can notice what I'll call our narratives around just before asking for help. It's like we're noticing, I can't figure this out on my own. And then we might have a go-to narrative that arises and maybe keeps us from enacting. Or maybe, as Becca illustrated, we may not have had that narrative, but now a narrative is beginning to form because of how people are responding to our requests for help. So in our mindful compassion practice, what I'm inviting you to do is ground on these quotes for interdependence, which are loaded into your learning management system, so the website or Blackboard, whichever one you're approaching this course. And reflect on those and begin to then notice this, what precedes the ask for help? What are the physiological sensations and thoughts as we ask for help? And then what's the physiology and thoughts once the response to help is given? It may be welcomed or unwelcomed response, right? What are we noticing? And then what are we noticing around the narrative that we're beginning to create in our mind? The story that we're creating in our mind. What happened is what happened. What you felt is what you felt. What you thought is what you thought. All that is to be held with reverence and self-compassion. What we're practicing in mindful, compassionate leadership is noting when these stories arise again and keep us from movement in ways that are in alignment with our way of being. Okay. So say that again. What we're noticing and we're practicing in our mindful compassion practices is noticing when these stories that may have a very good reason for being there arise in the moment just before choice and keep us from making the choice of becoming or being the leader we know we are, the leader we know we are meant to be. Okay, right. So it is 12:55 in Pacific time. That means I need to bring our time together to a close. Now it's 12:56. So my invitation is that there are these other practices on your practice portion of your course. So either on the Rush Into Yoga website, you can go to practices and look for these recordings, or you can go to Blackboard and look for resources practices and they'll be there, whichever way you're approaching the course. But there's some other practices that promote compassion and interdependence. And these are listed for you here. And if you really want to be courageous, then we have some even what Meng would call exercises for the brave-hearted. And some of you know these as Tonglen practices. So these are available to you on the website. If you can't find them, please let me know. Also, if you have practices that work for you that aren't mindful compassion practices that are not up on our resource site, please feel free to share them. We would love to cite you or the work that they came from and make that available to more mindful compassion practitioners. All right? All right. So with that, the invitation again is grounding in this practice, this grounding in this practice of noting who am I, what do I want, what is my life's purpose, for what am I grateful, and noticing how that plays out in relationship to whatever it is, this person, this interaction, this experience in this moment, noting how we feel about this, noting the physiological sensation, noticing the thoughts, exploring what's my role in how I'm feeling? What's my role in what I'm noticing? Is there a story here that I'm not, from the past that I'm not aware of? Is there a fear of the future here that I'm not aware of? Noting that with kindness. What are my options for choice within my locus of control? Which choice is the most loving for me and others? What would it look like to choose that? What would it look like to accept the consequences of that choice? It's our conscious choice making. Yeah. All right. So in moving to the end of our time together, my invitation is that as leaders, you are all successful. Baron Baptiste, everything you've done this far in your life has given you everything you have and everything you have not. Everything you have done this far in your life has given you everything you have and everything you have not. If we're inviting in more of what we have not, more mindfulness embodiment, more compassion embodiment, then this moment is a new moment, new opportunity for a new choice. What would you like to choose? All right. We are moving to a close. You are so welcome to post your questions on the discussion board or I'll just put the email in, rushingtoyoga@gmail.com. Thank you all. Have a beautiful, beautiful week, and I look forward to seeing you next week. All right, take good care.